Hi, my name is David Allen Lambert. I am Chief Genealogist for American Ancestors by the New England Historic Genealogical Society in Boston, Massachusetts. I am pleased to give you this third part of a call to arms researching Revolutionary War soldiers. This session, Adopt the Regiment. The American Revolution is a pinnacle part of our American story, and the learning of the soldiers in our family are just one part of it. You have to embrace more than just your own ancestors to sometimes get their entire story. On Lexington Green on April the 19th, 1775, the American Revolution started right here in New England. At that point in time, we were a fledgling nation faced upon a battle on Lexington Green that would spill over to Yorktown. And all the years in between will cause casualties, change the lives and fortunes of so many people of the new American colonies. Why adopt the regiment? The stories of your ancestors' fellow veterans during the Revolutionary War may add detail to the story you may already know about your ancestor. Their associated stories actually may glean you more details about your ancestor's life. Your ancestor may have not collected a pension, for instance, may have not lived past 1818 when most of the soldiers' pensions were handed out, but a fellow veteran in his regiment may have. Let's think of this as an interesting example. You may not have the details of your ancestor, you may not have a letter or a diary, but if you adopt the people that served with him, maybe those little facts of the story of your ancestor's military career will come to life through the voices of those who served with him. Learning the stories of others who served really truly adds a greater depth to your ancestor's Revolutionary War story. What should I do first? The first things in any research to adopt the regiment are getting sort of the players involved. And that's pretty simple. If you can get a muster roll or the list of those who served on the same vessel, this will be very useful to you. You want to determine who the captain of your ancestors' company was within the regiment, because that's a larger group. Now, the company is going to be smaller. It can be fewer than 100 men. The regiment is going to be many companies to make up that one regiment. Or maybe you know the name of the vessel that your ancestor served under, and maybe the master of that vessel. That way you can start to gather the names. Examine those muster rolls that you can find on Fold 3 and FamilySearch.org. In the first part of our class, you probably learned how to find the service record of your soldier. Determine who the colonel of the regiment was or the master of the vessel. This will give you a better chance to learn more about those involved with their crew or their company or regiment, because they're going to write about them. Let me explain. Why research the officers? More chances that the officers left a journal or any official correspondence discussing the military service or battles they are involved with improves greatly. The chances are that they are writing to the higher officers, exchanging letters back and forth about battles, may give you the detail that your ancestor didn't leave. Perhaps they didn't leave a journal or a diary, your own ancestor. So let's see what the officers had to say. More chances than none, the officers may have written up in a military history, so you can find a story or a biography, or maybe even an image. The possibility of documents that may potentially mention your ancestor increases by looking at the officers from their captain straight up to the colonel. Maybe your ancestor did something very heroic, or maybe something very non-heroic. I'll let the officers tell you all about that. Examine a muster roll. Here's an example of my own ancestor, Captain Jonathan Poor, captain of the 2nd Essex Militia in Massachusetts. On the left-hand side is the full muster roll for the Lexington Alarm, when his company from Newbury, Massachusetts marched on the alarm of April 19th, 1775. Now, they weren't there at Lexington and Concord, but no doubt were on the battle road afterwards. Who are the players involved? On the left-hand side is the full muster roll. I've zoomed in a little bit closer for you to see the names, and it tells you their rank and the amount of days they served. In this case, most of them served 6 days, not even a full week, as they marched on the alarm of April the 19th. What do I do next? Well, I start to transcribe the names on a spreadsheet. As you can see here, I've placed down some of the names: Jonathan Poor, Simeon Hale, Henry Dole, etc., their rank, the date of the muster, and the source. If you find anything online or maybe even in archives, it's always good to mark down your original source. Maybe it's a published transcription of a muster roll. Then put the title and the citation so you can find it again and share. The simple Excel spreadsheet is an easy way to create your own database as you start to adopt the regiment. Go beyond the muster rolls. Add additional columns for research data. You may want to include the birth, the death, the parents, and the spouses of each one of the veterans. You might wonder, why would you put the spouses? Well, if you're going to start to look at pension records, you want to know who their widows are in case they get a pension, mentioning stories about their late husband. Parents are important because you might find a connection. Maybe more than one person is serving, maybe brothers in the same company. Birth and death, of course, is important to sort of determine you have the right person. If your ancestor was from, say, northern Vermont, chances are they're not going to be serving in the 2nd Essex Militia out in Newbury, Mass. As you can see, many of the soldiers here are around the same age, and most of them, as I investigated, were born near or close by to Newbury, Massachusetts. And then, of course, one of the next steps we'll look at is determining whether or not the soldier got a pension. So marking down that they got a pension, looking at one of the indexes on fold 3 that you probably learned about in the last class, will be important for you to start to investigate the others as you adopt the regiment. Pension clues. Why would you want to look at a pension anyways? Maybe your ancestor didn't live long enough. Most of the soldiers' pensions, as we've learned, were not given out to 1818. Here's an example of my 4th great grandfather, Joshua Whitney's soldier's pension. This is the actual folder. This pension is available on fold3.com. What I have here is the initial story my ancestor wrote about his service. Applying for his pension, he gives some details about being with certain captains and certain colonels during his military service. Now, this is altogether good, but it is only one chapter of his military life. Maybe he neglected to give all the detail or all the battles. That's why you want to look further in a pension file. Specifically, what you want to look for are these. These are affidavits written on behalf of your ancestor to help support their claim for a pension. Now, here's John Burnell of Gorham, Maine, writing an affidavit for Joshua. What he mentions in here is an important fact. Joshua Whitney served in the same brigade in the Revolutionary War to which I belonged, that I served several times, saw him during the time I belonged to the said brigade. So they're in the same unit. So now I know a little bit about Joshua's association with John, that John obviously served with him. What do I do next? Well, in some cases, your ancestor may return the favor. Maybe if you look up the pension files of those who wrote affidavits for your ancestor, you then in turn can see if your ancestor wrote a letter on their behalf. Well, let's look a little bit further on John Burnell. John Burnell also has a pension, and this is the pension file jacket from Fold 3. Now, in it, I learned some facts about John's life that I'm going to put into an Excel spreadsheet for those who served with my ancestor. It tells me that he has a wife named Lydia, who's 74 years old, and it tells me some of his details of his life. He had no real estate that he owned, and it says, my son has support for me past 10 years, except for what I have received as a pension. So, and he's marking with an X, so he's not literate. And what I find in John Burnell's pension is something that may apply to my ancestor, since they served in the same brigade, and something my ancestor neglected to tell us in his pension. I marched into Boston after it was evacuated by the British troops. That would be Evacuation Day, March 17th, 1776. Subsequently, I marched to Ticonderoga, was present at the surrender of General Burgoyne at the Battle of Monmouth. Wow, 2 battles and some service about my ancestor's time in the same brigade that I didn't know about. I sure didn't know that he marched into Boston after the British evacuated. Wow, there's some great details right here just by looking at the next person involved in his pension, basically the affidavit of just looking at one person, John Burnell. Now there's multiple affidavits. What will I learn in the next? Well, let's concentrate on John a bit. Now in John's pension, I learned another person, and this is the domino effect. This Josiah Jenkins of Gorham also served with John. Now, he didn't write an affidavit for my ancestor, Joshua Whitney, but if they're in the same brigade, maybe some aspects of Josiah's service will lead into telling me more about what my ancestor's military life was like by association. So what I've been able to determine is John Burnell was born circa 1743 and died in 1822. He was born in Gorham, Cumberland County, Maine. He died there in January of 1822. He married July 3rd, 1766, and this fact surprised me. It wasn't just an association by being a soldier with Joshua Whitney. He married Lydia Whitney, the daughter of Abel Whitney. Abel Whitney was the uncle of Joshua Whitney. So yes, John Burnell's wife was my 4th great-grandfather's first cousin. So a family member and an associate in arms. You really have to spend a little bit of time doing the research, but you might find some of these affidavits have a closer connection than just being in the same regiment. In this case, I found a new relative. Seeking original records and descendants. Of course, one of the things that we love to find in our ancestors are journals and diaries that they wrote. Perhaps you'll find one, or maybe you might find letters or family manuscripts. American Ancestors, the New England Historic Genealogical Society, has over 28 million manuscripts in our collections, including documents and diaries that date back to the era of the Revolutionary War and before. Now, letters are a wonderful thing, especially if you can find correspondence from your soldier back to their family or from the family to the soldier at the time of the war. Now, don't limit yourself to the National Archive and the Library of Congress and state historical societies. Check with local historical societies. In my hometown in Stoughton, Massachusetts, we actually have a couple diaries from the American Revolutionary War. They're not microfilmed, they're not digitized, and they're not online. Look on the local level. You never know what is in a local historical society, especially when you're adopting the regiment or just looking for your own ancestor story. Another wonderful website to use, and you'll find this URL available in my syllabus attached with this lecture, is Archive Grid. Archive Grid will allow you to search on that colonel's name, the name of that vessel, maybe the captain who served with your ancestor, or maybe just periodically run the names of those who served with your ancestor through the search criteria here. Maybe you'll find a diary or a letter for an associate of your ancestor. And maybe if you're lucky, maybe in your own ancestor's diary or letters might show up in a collection that you were not aware of. An example of somebody who served in the American Revolution who's buried right down the street from me is Captain Asa Waters, who was married 3 times, and he had a connection back to the early days of the American Revolution and, of course, fighting alongside those as the British retreated back from Lexington and Concord. Here's an example of Sons of the American Revolutionary War membership application on Ancestry.com. This is for one of Asa Waters' descendants. Remember, as we build the stories of adopting the regiment, maybe descendants actually have material or have already done research. Track down those who joined the Sons of the American Revolution and the Daughters of the American Revolution. The applications for the SAR from 1889 to 1970 can be found on Ancestry.com. You can also go further and search the SAR Patriot Index right on our website. from the Sons of the American Revolution. Incidentally, I'm the state historian from the SAR in Massachusetts. I'm pleased to show you this page for Asa Waters, and it tells us that we have one member who is actually a descendant. In his application, you could purchase from the SAR for $10. This is similar to what the DAR offers under their ancestor search. Here's a similar entry, and this is for Asa Waters. Now, in the SAR, we currently have one member, and we've had some in the past. Those older ones aren't listed, but with the DAR, we can find out a variety of things. Asa Waters' 3 wives. And we can also find the different captains and colonels he served under his service description. We can also find out his dates, which match up with the gravestone perfectly. These are all the descendants of Asa Waters. You click on each one of these and you can get some detail on the generations, or if you pick one that is of interest, maybe a more recent application to catch maybe a living member, you can purchase that from the DAR right online. What do I do next? Obviously, we've gathered a little bit of information in our time together on this session on how to find the records, maybe things to look at like pension records, but there's probably more to your efforts. Create a free group on Facebook for descendants of your ancestors' regiment or vessel. Do you know that if you create a free and open group on Facebook, Google will index it? Sure. So you don't even have to create your own web page. You can do it through Facebook if you have an account. It's very easy to create a group on Facebook. Just Google create a group, facebook.com, and you'll get the step-by-step instructions. You can get it done in a matter of minutes. Contact descendants of those who served with your ancestor by looking at those SAR and DAR applications, and maybe find that this group you create on Facebook will even net more people as you list in your group those that served, because you now have that Excel spreadsheet with all those details. Sharing information online as a database, you can add that information very easily to your Facebook group just by cutting and pasting or adding the file as a download, as a PDF, or even publish a book or a booklet with your research of what you found. Just put it as the 2022 edition. And as you get more editions, you can do an addendum every year if you like. Visit the graves of your fellow veterans, of your ancestors, and schedule a reunion of the descendants that you found through social media or through your own research. Remember those who fought and died alongside your patriot ancestor, as their story may add a little bit more to what we know already of our own ancestors. So adopt the regiment. Thank you very much and enjoy RootsTech 2022.